Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Welcome to this event. It's been delivered by Féile and Phobail's program in partnership with Whiterock Children's Centre, and will feature as part of our Spring Festival, Féile and Earraigh. The purpose of the talk is to highlight the diversity that now exists across our community, the barriers and the challenges we aspire newcomer citizens, particularly around language and education. Now, we know the title is a bit controversial. Do you speak English? And this is intended to be somewhat provocative, as this can be also a negative perception. So I'm just going to pass over to the panelists now to introduce themselves, and maybe start with, oh, we've moved again, with Pauline. If you just give us an introduction and what you do in Conway Mill.
Okay, so my name is Pauline Kersten. I'm the Centre Manager of Conway Education Centre, which is a community organisation focusing on providing educational opportunities and educational support for the local community.
Thank you.
The organisation has been in existence since 1982, and currently we have 5 staff. We provide roughly about 20 accredited courses a year that varies from GCSE Maths and English to essential skills to bookkeeping and accounts and computer courses. We provide about 18 unaccredited courses per year, which is arts, crafts, etc. We host diploma courses in complementary therapies together with Spring Hill Community House, and we provide 7 ESOL courses per week. So there's 7 different classes per week over the year. And then we have a homework club for refugee families. The homework club currently has about 45 families on their books. That's about 65 children. On the whole, we have roughly about 800 adult learners a year. And we work with 35 amazing volunteers that help with the homework support for children and families, and also in the office. And they work as language assistants during the ESOL classes. So it's quite a bit for a small organization. And lockdown has been a big strain because we can't come together and meet in person. Everything has to go over the internet, and it has really shown the digital divide within the community, with a lack of internet access and a lack of devices. But we do it as good as we can.
Okay, like us all, we're still able to keep links with people, so that's important. Kieran, I'm just going to pass over to yourself.
Okay, yeah, good morning. My name is Kieran Shields. I'm from the Education Authority's Intercultural Education Service. We provide advice and support and guidance to schools around issues including support for asylum seekers and refugees, newcomer, Roma and traveller children. Although we have a small team of 20 staff across Northern Ireland, it's a mixture of teachers, social workers and others from a community development background. And we provide advice, guidance and support both to schools, but we also support families and children. Particularly the likes of Roma and traveller families who find it difficult to access schools. And we provide everything from accessing nursery and primary school, transitions to post-primary, and then access to information about out-of-school hours learning. And we are very deeply involved in some of the partnership schemes, particularly the Syrian refugee scheme, the Vulnerable Persons Relocation Scheme. And we're also working with Denise Wright in South Belfast and other partners in trying to increase the number of devices going out, particularly to asylum seekers and refugees. And we help schools identify those families who need devices under the current Department of Education device loan scheme. We also have a number of advice, guidance, animations and videos on our website, which are translated into the top languages. That's me briefly.
Okay, Kieran, thank you. I think that's been informative for us all as well. Sue, I'm just going to pass over to you now.
Right. So my imagine why Dr. is Misha Sue Pentel, agus is Misha in a Príomhoifigeach in Ionad. tá trocha blaen deis imléna. So I'm Sue Pentel, and I'm the, I don't like using the word CEO. It's actually a point that I'm going to make. Anyway, I'm the principal coordinator in Ionad. Ionad is an Irish language, family and community centre, and we were 30 years old this calendar year. So we've been here a long time, and I have to say, I've been here a long time. So thank you so much for the invitation. I suppose that when I saw the title of the panel today, I gave some thought to the experience that you would have if the answer to the question is English, do you speak English, was no. And if I'm going to answer it, I want to say, actually, I do, but I don't. So in a sense, I think, and I mean, I've been reflecting on this, I'll talk about but I just want to open this up as a train of dialogue, if you like, that in order to understand the experience of people who've travelled into our community and to celebrate it, you have to get under the skin of another language. And if we can't do that, if we can't celebrate that, then we can't support the lived experiences. And a language is a way of communicating your lived experiences. And in a sense, what Ionad is about giving that second perspective. We're all about promoting immersion and the Irish language. We provide Irish language daycare services, Irish language preschool and after school services. We work with Beachmount Sure Start. We provide an Irish language program for 2-year-olds. So we have hundreds of children, and luckily, Pauline, our experience is a wee bit more positive than yours. We're open. There are children and parents coming through the doors. It is different. Clearly, there are a lot of controls and measures in place. So you can't just run out and say to someone, how's it going? Give me a hug. But we are able to offer those services. And what we're doing is we're offering a second experience to those children. Something that Annie Andrews, who was involved in the development of the Shores Road and the school next to us, Gael Sconawall, said, a second window on the world. We're raising aspirations and we're celebrating diversity. And you know, it's easy to lose a language. It's easy to let minority languages go. It's a bit like the discussion we'll be having about the environment. But if you want, it goes to the quality of the life that you want to develop for your children. So we're all about intergenerational community language. So a language doesn't exist in textbooks or you know, in dictionaries. It exists in a community, and we're building a community around the language. And we're very lucky that we have a very strong, positive relationship with all the community centres around us and are able to support everybody in terms of family support, support for children with autism. But more importantly, one of the key things that we do is one of our key aims is to open the language to everybody, and that means everybody. That just doesn't mean someone who doesn't speak Irish, because that's the majority of you guys out there. Now, it might not be the majority in these walls, it might not be the majority in this little area. As I walk down the street in Ivy, I see loads of kids coming out of the house with, you know, Irish language. You know, they go to the local school, they shout at each other in Irish. I'm not saying they only use Irish, but we want to build a society with that richness, with that diversity, with that layers experience, and give that to our children. We do have, I would say, over 150 children coming through the doors every day. We have 160 people attending language classes. They have been affected by the lockdown, and they are delivered virtually. Adults, parents, and we also we go from beginners right through to O&A level, and with over 20 students who've now registered for O&A level this year, which I think is quite brave in Irish because of, you know, all the uncertainty about examinations and actually working through Zoom. And we support the, as I said, we work closely with the Family Support Hub and help in any way we can. We have been delighted to welcome a number of people from ethnic minority languages through our doors. And for them, having 2 languages isn't an issue. It's almost laughable if you're from Syria. I mean, we had a mummy there last year, and I would say she came in with 3 languages and was delighted that her child was getting a taste of another one, and one that she appreciated and that we should all, you know, understand is everywhere around us. And obviously we might come back to that in the debate. The Irish language is alive and well in the English that you use, never mind learning the language. From Kenya, and the lived experience.
Can I just stop you there? Because you're going to go into my next questions and then you'll panic me because I'll have no questions.
Absolutely no problem. I'll stop. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure those points weren't lost in, you know, describing our services.
Okay, okay, Denise, thank you. You want to come in now?
So I'm the Race Relations Coordinator of South Belfast Roundtable. We're a partnership of 105 groups. We began 2004 as a response to rising hate crime in the area. And our work now is predominantly much more around building good relations and sort of integration. So the services we offer, they're a mix. I coordinate a number of interagency groups. Probably the most key for this is the Refugee and Asylum Forum for Northern Ireland. But I deliver a lot of training as well. Training around refugee awareness, migration awareness, sort of anti-racism, also introduction to intercultural competency combined with our Small Worlds events, where you can come along in a cafe-style environment and meet 5 or 6 people from a range of different backgrounds and cultures who'll talk about and able to represent their own cultures in a way that somebody from here really can't. And all of those would really be doing that in their second language. The hosts for that come from Belfast Friendship Club, which meets every Thursday night. It's been going for over 10 years in Common Ground Cafe in South Belfast. If you turn up on a normal Thursday night in non-COVID times, you will meet up to 60 people, 20 different nationalities, many different and far more cultures, because people are complex. You know, it's not just about the language, it's also about culture. Particularly over COVID, we've been doing a lot of sort of service delivery, working in partnerships with other groups around food parcels. And as Kieran said, working with the EA at the moment around data provision. So my hallway is filled with 150 dongles. And so every single asylum seeking family will receive at the beginning of March 6 months unlimited free data, which will help not only with education, but also in language learning. So we have another Women of the World group as well. So there are quite a range of things, and a lot of our stuff is member-led initiatives where people are just getting together, learning about each other, learning words of each other's language, and building friendships.
Okay, everybody, that's a very diverse, different backgrounds that we all come from. So maybe start with you, Pauline. What cultures now exist within our community and specific to Conway Mill?
I think there's a real mix of cultures and identities in Conway. We would have people from Syria, that would be our biggest group, but then there's the Somalis. Then we have people from Iran, from Sudan, from Yemen, but we also have people from Russia, from Poland, from Romania, from Hungary, the odd person from France and Spain and Italy. So there's a real mixture. And I think the learning environment is ideal for mixing because people learn together. I mean, not all of the newcomers would be in English language classes, in ESOL classes. Some would have enough English to access, for instance, our computer classes or bookkeeping and accounts. Because what many of the people have in common is that they are very determined to learn the language to such a level that they can access further education and make a career and make a life for themselves. And I think when you talk about languages, as somebody coming from who came from another country 30 years ago to the north of Ireland, and even though I had reasonably good English language skills at that time, I think there is a lack of understanding how difficult it is from somebody who is not a native English speaker to be immersed in English 24/7 all the time. That if you want to access a service like a school, a doctor, a library, a shop, that you have to do it in English because they'll not understand anything else. And that's fair enough. This is you are in a different country, but it is exhausting, it is training. And just because you know how to make a sentence doesn't mean that you also comprehend the answer.
Yeah.
The understanding of a language the first couple of years is a very literal understanding. So if you have a conversation with somebody and that other person says to you, well, I'll see you later. I remember the first couple of years, I would immediately think, later? What time? What day? Why? It's very simple things that I recognize in many of the refugees and people and newcomer families that arrive in Conway. And we have a laugh about it. But I think especially around schools, there is a lack of understanding with teachers and within the school environment, how difficult it is to comprehend properly, fully another language. It's how difficult it is to learn maths or to learn science, having to access this new language and then having to understand the subtlety in the language. What does it mean? And it's very hard, I think, to explain that experience unless you've had that experience yourself. And one of the things, and I'm not sure where we're going to touch on that later on, is that what frustrates me at times is that the North is trying to reinvent the wheel in dealing with newcomer families. If you look at other countries in Holland and France and Germany and Denmark and Sweden, they've been working with refugees and newcomer families for a lot longer. And they have established models of good practice. And I'm not saying that we should just, copy that and import it, but look at what works and see if it could work here and try to build on that rather than go back to scratch and trying to do it all ourselves. And that's going to take years. And we're going to make the same mistakes as other countries have made. And we don't have to.
Yeah.
There's good practice out there that we could use.
Thank
okay,
you.
So that's a very long-winded way of saying
thank you.
Any cultures.
Kieran, obviously you have the job of trying to support these children in schools all over the North. So maybe your experience, the variety of languages and how you manage that through the education system.
Yeah, Deirdre, it's really interesting. When I started in education in 2003, there were less than 4,000 newcomer pupils across Northern Ireland, and there were only about 10 languages. And that was mainly in the Belfast and Southern Education Board area. We now have over 16,000 newcomer pupils, and they speak over 80 different languages.
Yeah.
And especially over the last 5 years, one of the most interesting development is that 20 of those minority languages are spoken on the African continent. So we have much more ethnically and culturally diverse school community than we have before. And also there's now well over 75% of schools in Northern Ireland have a newcomer pupil who speaks another language other than English. And the majority of these children, as Pauline said, are actually multilingual. So I think the debate title is interesting and stimulating. Do you speak English? And sometimes schools with limited experience of newcomers, that is one of the first questions they ask. We always turn that question around and say, how many languages do you speak is a better introductory question, because most pupils do. We have had a lot of experience with even the Roma communities coming to areas like Newry and Armagh, but they were coming via Bulgaria, via Spain, England and other countries. So by the time they came to Northern Ireland, they were bilingual and multilingual. So schools can make that mistake of focusing in on the English deficit, but not actually seeing the linguistic skills that children have. So it's quite an interesting one. When we look at the schools over the last 5 years, we have had over 300 staff who have completed an intercultural education course in partnership with ourselves and Queen's University, and the likes of Denise's organisation and lots of others provide cultural competence training right back to the Belong project over 5 years ago with STEP in Dungannon. So our school teaching population and the non-teaching staff have become more culturally competent and confident. And that's part of it, is be confident around asking children about their culture and their language. And then we can talk about it later, some of the good examples, but sharing those languages as soon as children come in through the front door. Everything a school should produce should have those words of welcome in numerous languages, and they should practice them every day. So I think we are becoming a more linguistically diverse and welcoming community.
Thank you, Kieran. Obviously, the concern now is children being out of school and how they're relating through Zoom and how far some of them are maybe getting left behind, and what the future holds for some of them. Because I know that we offer some services, and the difficulty of trying to do learning through the Zoom is really some of the children.
Yeah, I think this is, I mean, Denise and others have pointed this out, that one of the big gaps that exists at the minute is the digital divide. Yeah. And that's right across, that's not just newcomer pupils, but it's certainly children in families where they're larger families. They may well be sharing one device, and they might actually be sharing an inappropriate device like a parent's mobile, and possibly only using that in the evening when the parent's finished with it. So there's been over 14,000 devices have been loaned out through schools, and there's another 10,000 devices coming through the current programme. So schools are trying their best to close that digital divide. But with schools being closed, there has been a variety of experiences. Some families have had really good experiences with schools and getting learning packs home and getting those packs back in. Others have found it really difficult to keep in touch. I know that's part of our restart programme, is to help families, particularly the likes of Roma and travellers, who can also experience forms of poverty and disadvantage, which means that even when they have the access to the device, they may not have printing at home, they may not have access to other resources. So it's not just the language barrier, although that remains the most significant one. And that's why we have translated on our website. There's a number of guidance notes there in different languages, and we have some videos, including one in Arabic, where a teacher tells families how to use commonly used apps that schools use, like Seesaw or Class Dojo, the likes of Google Classroom. So I think that closes that gap where parents and children can learn together at home, when they realise that there are materials and resources that you can use at home. But unfortunately, income and poverty remains one of the most pervasive barriers that we have. And that's very difficult for educationalists or community development organisations to solve on their own. I mean, that's a massive societal issue that government needs to look into. Thankfully, some of the other supports that have been provided during the lockdown, including the free school meals extension over the school breaks, have been massive, and other charities have been getting food packs, and we're also delivering learning packs with some partners in different areas as well, where home learning materials are delivered out to the home. So there's been some incredible positives, but as we do this phased return back to school, schools will definitely spot the regression that a lot of children have drifted back and their language maybe has receded. So a lot of work will be about the social and emotional well-being of children first, and then the learning recovery and recovering the language, and particularly additional English after school hours to help children catch up. I know the department, obviously, it's a phrase they don't want to be using publicly for very good reasons. We shouldn't really be talking about deficits or gaps or catch up, but there will be work that schools and ourselves are going to have to do to help bridge those gaps.
Okay, thank you, Kieran. Denise, I'm just going to move on to you, because South Belfast was known long before newcomer families settled in West Belfast. So I was going to say you're an old hand at it, but maybe you could give us an overview of South Belfast, what languages or what you're coming across now.
I think similar to what Pauline's saying, it's such a diversity. There's so many languages, and I would say, you know, oh goodness, maybe sort of 40, 50 at least I would have come across. But it's also worth remembering it's not just about what languages you speak, it's also about what culture you're from, what your wider background is. And, you know, something, you know, Pauline, you were saying about literal English. I remember a young Sudanese man saying to me when I first arrived at the beginning, one day I was at a bus stop and I was waiting for a bus and no bus came. And an old lady sat beside me and I said to her, today, no buses. And she said, son, it's a bank holiday, you'll be waiting for donkeys. So he said, I didn't say anything. And then I said to her, in my country, we have donkeys. Today you have donkeys, not buses. She looked, I never mentioned donkeys, son. And he said, no, this is what you said. And she then had to explain that it was a local saying. And so the language is difficult and we don't speak BBC language. I'm trying to speak more slowly because I'm doing a Zoom at the minute, but we speak quickly. We speak in colloquialisms, and even people who arrive with better English than most people here have, it's not, they don't hear us that way, and it can take 6 months for somebody even just to tune their ear to us. Yeah. It's also really important for me, you know, I think for children to be retaining their mother tongue. I've been doing a lot of family research, went back in 2 generations ago. My Irish grandfather put down Irish as his first language. My Scottish grandfather had Gaelic, great-grandfather had Gaelic. I have none, I've lost them, and it feels to me that it's so important because people should have pride in their heritage and in their background. And it's also about cultural greetings. I know that from Friendship Club. When I walk through the door, oh goodness, it's like a minefield. If I meet a Syrian man, I say, hello, it's nice to meet you. If he shakes my hand, that's okay. If I meet Zimbabwean friends, they want a great big hug. When I meet European friends, they want to kiss you. 1 cheek, 2 cheeks, 3. And if you get it wrong, kiss them the lips in the middle. It's really embarrassing. So it's important we don't just take language, we take culture, we take the way people greet into account. And so we have a real richness of language and culture and different ways of being now. And it's really enriched us.
Funny enough, Denise, French people don't like French kisses.
Kieran, I will not ask how you know that.
Right, Sue, maybe you'll be able to accommodate Denise with some Irish language classes now if she wants.
Absolutely, 100%, Denise. The culture, you're very welcome.
Obviously, Irish language is your first love and your first language. So, for you introducing new languages as well, Sue, is that cause any difficulty, or well, for everybody?
I just want to make a comment a bit similar to Pauline's. Anybody listening will know I'm not from here. And it took me, and I think Denise, you hit the nail on the head, it took me a good 6 months to understand what was being said. And because I was interested in it, well, I became interested in Irish when I had children, but I came from a sort of multicultural London. I had a Russian grandmother that never learned English, and I had a number of other languages in my sort of community background. But a good 6 months, and I still have a friend in Derry, and I keep saying, Danny, can you repeat that? But when I ring home, they think I sound Irish. So what it must be like, the lived experience of people who've come here, I think that is such an important point, and both Pauline and Denise have made it, and the greeting. So we were very privileged in the Ionad a few years ago to host a club, a welcome club for the Chinese community, and we did it in partnership with Bernardo's. And I mean, to my shame, I only learned a smattering of Cantonese, and I learned a lot about it. So we had families from Hong Kong, we had families from mainland China. I know how to say hi in Chinese, ni hao, and through Sure Start, the program for 2-year-olds, and just through our general daycare and being so close to the hospital, we would have a number of Chinese families. We would have Syrian, Sudanese, all the wonderful mix that you've mentioned. And I would say salam alaikum to those that I meet and that I might get to know. We have African, we have Nigerians. They would have Shoshana as a as a language. And I did mention a Kenyan family who are nearly through the school. I'm very, very proud of that. And this particular mum, her home language was Kikuyu. And I don't know if anybody knows anything about language revival, but there is a famous writer of Kikuyu who is also reflecting what you're saying, Denise, reflecting that the cultural riches of his native language must be preserved. So where she came from, she would have been brought up with two African languages, Kikuyu and Shona, but they were forced to speak English in school. And we had a round table discussion one day, just informally. We used to have like a drop-in situation in the morning. You make a cup of tea, sit down and shoot the breeze with everybody. And, you know, it was wonderful because you might have Africa, China, Russia. We had a Belarusian family and local people in the room, and we were all rapping and joking. So she told us this day that I was sort of reflecting on how Irish was replaced by English in the bad old days, and that it's really a question of control and power rather than diversity, and why, you know, it was why it was so wonderful to pass it on to the, you know, another language onto the children. And I'll say a very small bit about that. And she said that she remembered that when they were in school, they were actually punished for speaking their language. And in Irish, many hundreds of years ago, there was a batter round the child's neck, and they were beaten, and there was a mark made. So if you spoke Irish too many times, you were beaten, and you had like so many marks on the batter around you. They had paper put in their mouths to stop them talking. I've never forgotten that conversation. That just tells you everything about someone's cultural identity. And I think what I want to say is that education is the greatest gift that we can. Actually, I've got a Mandela quote. Hang on. Here we go. Education is the most powerful weapon that you can use to change the world. Nelson Mandela. And that's what we're about. So we are so lucky, and I'm so lucky to have been part of this, to pass on the opportunities that education offers in two languages, and sometimes 3 and 4. So what we can offer, I think, is not the practical. Obviously, we'll do the practical stuff, and that you guys are wonderful, and we know how to contact you if a family needs, and that's so important. I totally agree with what Pauline was saying. We don't understand what it's like to queue in the doctors and for the receptionist to say, "Who are you? You know, where do you live?" and not give you a chance to try and communicate with them, even in English. But what we can offer is hope and aspiration, and the ability to be comfortable in your cultural skin, and to learn to live in a sense in two cultures and celebrate them. But I don't think we're doing enough. I don't think, Kieran, you said we're becoming a welcoming community. Well, hey, so we'll have 5 languages on the door. Where are the multicultural people on this panel, on our boards, on our committees, you know, on our television? And I really do believe until we have, and maybe it's a challenge for Féile and Phobail,
well,
to rerun this.
So, Pauline, did you want to come in again? Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, when you talk about celebrating and culture and the importance of language, and one of the things that I often see with many of our learners, first of all, they're survivors. You know, they got out of the situation that they were in. They managed to make it here. They're survivors. They do not give up. They're multi-talented. They are multi-skilled. But one of the things that is keeping them back from using those skills and those talents is the language. And yes, we can be very welcoming of many languages. If your English language skills are not sufficient to get you through a job interview, or to get you through an assessment to get on a course, that's a problem. And I find that many of our families, many of our adults, they are multi-skilled, multi-talented, often through learning from their parents and their community in their own country. So they are master carpenters, they are master tailors, they are master woodworkers. They can't find a job here or can't access employment here because of their language skills. The answer to language skills has been the formal ESOL courses as they are delivered, for instance, in the colleges. That's a difficulty for many of our adults because they are not formally educated to absorb that. Those kind of formal educational classes don't connect with them. They find it very difficult to learn a language that way. They are better suited to language learning in practice. And I think there's not enough recognition of the different learning styles. Yeah. And that means that those people can't use their skills and their talents, and they're sitting at home and they're frustrated and they think they're never going to learn English. It's never going to work out. Their children learn English quicker than they. Sometimes the wives learn English quicker than the men. So there's a whole host of potential problems that will come up in the future around mental health, about family tensions, and then I'm not even talking about cultural classes. Because the culture here is so very different from the culture in Kenya, in Syria, in Afghanistan. And young people take it on quicker than the parents. So you're going to have those tensions building in society as well. And I think it's fantastic the way society here has developed, and I am delighted that it's culturally far more richer, far more diverse than it used to be. And I think there's many, many positives, but I also can see a car crash waiting to happen if we do not recognize the potential problems that we are storing up for the future. And when we just glean over it because it's too complicated or too expensive to deal with. And then we're going to get situations that we can see in other countries. If you look at, for instance, and that is one of the things, I know it has very little to do with language, but it has to do with integration and making a successful multicultural society. And that is the whole issue of housing. Look where the housing policy puts our newcomer families. Look at what kind of houses they're being put in.
Right, Pauline, I'll have to stop you there because I need to move on. You sort of mentioned jobs, getting jobs. That's sort of my next question. The whole social there, they've come here to take our jobs. They're getting loads of money, and they're living the life. And maybe Denise can answer this for me. Let the public know what are the entitlements for refugees and asylum seekers, just to get rid of that myth. Maybe start with you, Denise.
Okay, I think, one of the things that is really complicated for people is the terminology, because we hear in the news about migrant crisis, refugee crisis. So if we talk about migrant workers, first of all, just to get it out of the way, migrant worker is somebody who's come for the primary purpose of employment, who's chosen to come to work. Yeah, it may be difficult back home, but they've made that choice, and they have, when they arrive here, they can work. Asylum seekers are very different than that. So under the United Nations Convention on Refugees since 1951, anybody in the world has the right, if they have a fear of persecution in their country of origin, just because of their race, their nationality, their ethnicity, membership of a social or political group, has the right to go to another country and claim asylum. So when somebody arrives here, they'll say to the powers that be, I want to claim asylum because I fear persecution. And at that point, an asylum seeker will be given basic housing, and it is very basic. They will get their heat and electricity paid. At the moment, because of COVID, the amount they get is up, and they're given £39 a month. When you think of how much basic universal credit would be for me compared to that, people are living in abject poverty and forced through, in my opinion, the UK government saying, this is what they're not allowed to work. Even if you are a surgeon in the middle of COVID, if you are an anaesthetic consultant, you cannot work as an asylum seeker. And so they're having to live that way. And I know people, and it would be rare to be as long as 14 years, but I have a friend who was 14 years seeking asylum in that situation. The minute she got asylum, because she'd been here, she's great English, she was straight into work, and she's worked incredibly hard to do that. But people are left in that kind of situation, so they have very little entitlement. You sure as heck don't pay £3,000 to a smuggler or much more to be brought here to live on £39 a month in, as you say, Pauline, very often what I would consider really inadequate kind of conditions. So once the Home Office tell you they believe you've a well-founded fear of persecution, you become a refugee. And once you're a refugee, you have the same entitlements as I have as somebody who's lived here all my life. The only difference is you can't vote. And after 6 years, you can apply for a British passport and go through the citizenship test. But when you're a refugee and you arrive, you know, as Pauline says, you're arriving in a strange country, you've very little language, and that's a real barrier to getting a job, no matter what your background is. When a refugee somebody has told you of refugee status, they are told you have 28 days to get out of your house. You have to go and present as homeless. In 28 days, you have to go and sign on for universal credit, and your NAS benefits will stop. We all know how long universal credit takes nowadays, getting your child allowance sorted. So it's a complete mindset, and it's very difficult, but people are resilient. They've been through so much just to make it to this little island at the very edge of Europe, that they are ready to build, you know, for the future, but it's difficult. And government is sitting at the minute on the draft refugee integration strategy. It should be out for consultation within the year, which will be great. But a strategy is no use unless you're putting resources towards it, and appropriate resources, and getting the right people to do the delivery of English, as Pauline has said, not assuming that one size fits all. And yet everybody's who wants to work and move on should be thinking, yes, we'll go to Belfast Met eventually to do my English. But in the meantime, you need English that's fit for purpose. I did 5 years of French at school. It wasn't any use to me at all. I'd have been far better going to conversation classes somewhere and learning. And so the rights and entitlements for people are very little. If you come as an asylum seeker, you live on £39 a month, and then you become a refugee, you'll get the very basics that anybody here would get and struggles to survive on.
Sorry, Denise, is that £39 a month or 39?
Oh, sorry, apologies, Paul. £39 a week, yeah.
Which is nothing really either, £39 a week. Here, what about within the education system for asylum seekers and refugees? I'm talking about things like reforms and what their entitlement is.
Yeah, and I suppose just to reiterate the point that Denise made about the vast majority of the 16,000 newcomer pupils are families of migrant workers who are economically active, and they are net contributors to society here. They pay more tax than they use in terms of benefits. So, I mean, they're not a drain on public services, and they contribute so much more in terms of their cultural contributions. Just for Sue, when you mentioned that earlier, a large number of those are making their way through as volunteers. We have a lot of classroom and teaching assistants who've come from a newcomer, and now thankfully we're seeing them coming through to becoming teachers as well. I see the last 60 on the course in January, the number of European names that I recognize that are Polish and Czech and that are doing our intercultural education course. So I think even the workforce is becoming more ethnically diverse. Now for school places, thankfully we actually have an excess of school places in Northern Ireland. So there's no asylum seeker, refugee or newcomer taking a place from any other child.
Yeah.
We have huge spaces all over Northern Ireland. Now, in some cases, the likes of Belfast, there may be pressure in certain areas and certainly pressures in special education schools, which can be difficult, particularly for Syrian and other refugees coming in who need a place. But any child has the right to a school place anywhere in the world. I mean, that's number one. And they may well be entitled to other things that support that school place, like school transport or being able to apply for uniform grant. All other welfare and free school meal entitlements then depend on their benefits. So an asylum seeker supported by the Home Office Asylum Support Assessment Team is entitled to free school meals, or if your child has a statement of special educational needs and they require a special diet. Other families who may not have an entitlement, they can still make an application and there can be referrals through education welfare for humanitarian grounds. And then that can last for 15, 16 weeks until their entitlement is established. So every school that I'm aware of will immediately provide a free school meal, but it's minimal. I mean, you're talking about 1s and 2s in 300, 400 place schools. So, I mean, the cost is minimal to any school picking up on a humanitarian grounds. And I don't know any governor of a school or any parent who would want their children to be refused a school meal when they arrive in a refugee and asylum experience. So the numbers are quite small who then go on, as Denise said, to actually get benefits, and the benefits they then get are minimal. But the contribution overall is massive, not just financially when they begin to work, but also culturally. Children will tell you, if you ever speak to children in school about having newcomer friends, they become more linguistically confident themselves. So they learn friends, they learn other cultures, they love sharing food and all the examples of culture that they have. So it's not just important to share language, but also to bring in all the other cultural aspects about music, dance, drama. And a lot of our schools have fantastic programs on a daily, weekly basis, or the likes of Language of the Month or language ambassadors, where those children get to shine and they share their language, but they also welcome in other children who share their home language. So, I mean, schools will tell you, and particularly we have 42 schools who are now schools of sanctuary. Those schools absolutely love their intercultural work. It brightens up the children's day. The staff love it because of the variety and the diversity and the absolute crack they have with children singing songs in their own language. They'll give you poems, etc. So not just learning English, whilst that is critically important, but retaining and developing your mother language is so important. And we have lots of communities who have Saturday clubs, whether it's Polish or Lithuanian, Arabic across Northern Ireland, that keep the mother language going as well. So the two things go hand in hand, but I mean, benefits and entitlements is a minimal problem. All children are entitled to basic education and they all get that here.
Okay, Pauline's jumping at the bit here, so let her answer this subject, and Sue's jumping. I hope you all remember that you said this was only going to be an hour, so keep everything as brief as possible, please.
Oh, well, there's a couple of things. One is that in our experience, if a young person is 16 or older, they cannot get a place in school anymore because the schools are oversubscribed in the Belfast area. We have a number of refugee young people that we have taken on because they couldn't get a place in school. And their 16th birthday was before September of the school of the academic year. So they weren't able to get a place in school. So that's one. Second, I think that overall schools are doing a lot of good things, but there is, in spite of all the work that's being done, I think there is a lack of understanding with some of the teaching staff about the difficulty of language and about understanding English language. As I said, it's different. You can put a sentence together or talk about your family or the weather. That doesn't mean that you understand a science class. Okay, and then I think the support from the community in education and working together with the schools is very, very important. There are a host of community organizations that provide educational support for newcomer families. I mean, Conway is one of them, and we work very closely together with the Full Service Community Network, which is a CCMS outfit that provides teachers to support education in schools and in the community. And I think that additional support is vital for the children and young people to be able to achieve in the formal school environment. And then the last thing I would like to say, one of the ways maybe of recognizing and celebrating languages is to introduce more languages in school. Why not have a GCSE in Arabic? Or why not have an A-level in Chinese?
We have some, Pauline.
I know we work, but that's externally funded, Kieran, as well. And there's great partnerships with other funding bodies, for instance, the Qatar Foundation International, they provide some support for Arabic language teaching, and the Education Authority has provided support for Arabic language teaching in one of the schools in Belfast. But I think recognition of language and the diversity of language may be an idea.
Believe it or not, we're coming to the end, and I move on to you, but I want to move on to a more positive note. What is the most positive factor of having such a diverse society now that we are all living in?
Right.
Oh, the food and the music and the hospitality.
I have to let Sue in here.
Yeah, so very briefly, and touching on both, the Irish language model, the immersion model, is all about speaking, communicating physically. So there's been a massive impact negatively on language skills and the development of them during the lockdown. This is a model that can be used to improve and support a richness of English for those newcomer families. And we've been talking about this for a long time, getting together, putting our heads together, after school clubs, where really what you're doing is you're reinforcing the language. Parents coming together at the same time. There's no substitute for talking to somebody continually. And I have to say that one of my experiences, what people appreciated most and what we've lost over the last period, was sitting down and have a chat, maybe once or twice a week. Thank you so much. How do you say that word? That's really helping. So Pauline, I totally agree with all the points you've made. More funding for different ways of learning. We're recognizing that in school, but far too late. And what are the benefits? The benefits are that we are building a society where everybody feels that they have a place, where the majority community is learning and where the minority communities are flourishing. And through that we change. Languages change, the interuse of languages, as you said, the cultural exchange. I think it's a massive plus, but there is so much more that we need to do. And one of the things we need to do is take, if you like, the formal model of education and adapt it to the needs of our whole society. I mean, we've had to do that in Irish medium. You can't teach Irish, you can't teach a second language remotely. You know, you can improve what's there. You need to be there, you know, that actual physical exchange, and that builds confidence, that builds trust, and that builds understanding of where we've all come from. So I think it's a massive plus. And the monocultural, the monolingual society that I came to 30 years ago has changed in a very positive way. But as I said before, we have so much more to do. Earraigh, yeah.
Denise, what is the positive about the new diverse society we live in for you?
I think for me, it's about constantly being challenged. It's that learning. It's the richness when you learn something new or you meet new people, and a new friendship. For me, it's about friendship. I have friends now from very diverse backgrounds who don't do things the same way I do, and who are constantly making me question, why do I do it? Because we naturally are very, what we say is, you know, ethnocentric. That we think everything revolves around the way we are, and we come from very parochial kind of attitude in this land, in this island, and this has broadened us. It's made us have to face some of that parochialism in our own lives and about who we are, build new friendships, build new relationships, and just get a much more global perspective.
Kieran, what about yourself?
Deirdre, I think it's the way in which language and stories are universal. I mean, we had a couple of great examples the year before last. The Syrian children and pupils from all over the north took part in designing a book called When the Lights Go Out, and it's published in Arabic and English, and it's on our website. And the children got stories from the likes of the Silky, the stories of the seal in Ballycastle and the mermaids, and stories from all over Derry City. And the Belfast one was really funny, that the Syrian children couldn't understand why people were hanging flags on lampposts. Story about the lampposts and community conflict, and they got to share their stories of conflict at home. Yeah. And the lamp was safety to them inside the house. when the lamp was on, they were safe. And those children co-created those stories by authors called Katabna. And we've just got additional funding from the Home Office to do another series of life stories from refugees this year, and we'll be doing those shortly. But one of the other ones in Belfast City Hall, when we get the certificates for the Schools of Sanctuary, there was a group of boys from Boys Model, all big strapping teenagers, 6 foot, huge boys standing beside me on the stage. And they were asked what it meant to them, and they were from Africa and Europe and all over the world. And the first couple of boys got up and in pure broad Belfast accent said, "When I first came to Belfast, I couldn't speak a word." Everybody was just laughing at these, like obviously African and Polish, with a pure Belfast accent. It was just so funny, but it's really life affirming when you see the way children use language and stories to convey a sense of who they are. So that's the best thing for us.
Pauline, you've already mentioned food and music, so do you want to add to that?
And their sense of generosity and hospitality, and their eagerness to share that around them, and how difficult it is, especially now with COVID, but even before COVID, not to be able to ask the neighbors and friends around to share meals, because that's what they're used to. I remember when I visited some families before COVID, when they mentioned that I was the first person that they shared a meal with since they arrived in Belfast, and that's when you're used to do that in your own culture, in your own country on a daily basis. You know, that was a big thing for them. And I also want to say, I think Belfast is a great place for people to arrive. I think community structures are very, very supportive. And yes, you would want to get people from diverse community represented in your committees and in your groups and on panels like this. But I think we also have to recognize there's a cultural difference, is that many of those countries don't have a community development sector within their countries. They don't know what it means or how it works. So that is an educational process that has to happen to explain that and say, well, this is how you can participate and this is how it works. And unless we explain that, you know, it stays an alien concept for them. And I think once you get them on board, yeah, let them take charge themselves and organize and work in partnership and collaborate and get their input in the different projects and ideas and progressions, because that's what you need. They know themselves what they need best, just as the community knew best what they needed when they started community development.
Yeah.
So
yes. Maybe one last positive view from yourself.
Absolutely. To be able to provide, and it goes to the question of training and jobs as well, quality childcare throughout for newcomer families, and the joy, you know, the support that gives them, and the, as you said, Pauline, the generosity and the engagement that you get from that, the friendship that you get from that, from the parents, the respect, if you like, the mutual respect that grows, but the absolute joy of the kids. You know, to see children from all those different backgrounds play together and learn from each other, and as you said, a number of people have said, swap, you know, stories of music, and the week project that you're talking about, sharing stories. We've done a few things like that, but unfortunately that they haven't been published, just if you like by word. Wonderful, just to see children from every background playing, and to allow people, and I think somebody else made this point, for example, I met someone who was a qualified mental health nurse, and all she needed was childcare to get onto a course, but because she was an asylum seeker, we could not come up with the amount of childcare that she needed. And I'm sure that, as someone else said, that resilient woman who was from Syria will be back, and we will celebrate her children. I think, Deirdre, you remember this case. She had twins. How wonderful, you know, and how wonderful to be able to support you know, those children, and for them to become the children you're talking about, Kieran, confident, multilingual, and enriching our society.
Okay, thank you, everybody. That's us coming to an end now. That's been a very interesting conversation that could have went on, even though everybody was not coming on board. And I should have knew that I had talkers to come on board, so it was obviously going to be Pauline and Kieran and Denise. Thank you so much. And I also have to mention the funders today, the executive office funded this event. Just to remind everybody, we're going out in the Spring Festival from the 1st to the 15th of March. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks for the invite.
Míle buenas.